Hey there, I'm Shauna Newman, and you can find me writing about site building and flipping over at skipblast.com, or over at Twitter offering hot takes on site building and other random stuff at Shauna Newman. Today, I'm going to be talking about site building with the intent of flipping that site for the most money possible by simply starting with that end goal in mind when you start out creating your site. All right, let's get started. Back when I sold my first site, which was almost 10 years ago now, I really wasn't viewing this whole thing as a business model, right? And I think that's probably true for most people out there who build a site and are like, hey, I think I can sell this for a few $1,000s, right? Now, at the time, what I had done is I had actually started a site that was based on some success that I had seen with some keywords on some Squidoo lenses that I had made around that time on the topic of home audio equipment. And just a quick sidebar here, because I know some of you are like, Squidoo, WTF, right? So as I mentioned, I've been in this industry a really, really long time. And while Squidoo no longer exists, hey, I'm still here, right? But basically, Squidoo was just this like huge user-generated site where you created articles around whatever keywords you wanted, primarily affiliate type topics. They called these articles lenses. And you ended up monetizing your lenses with your Amazon affiliate links and any other affiliate links that you had. And back then, that's what I actually did when I wanted to test keywords before I built a site around a particular topic or set of keywords. All right, SEO history lesson over. Let's get back to it. The point is that I was making sites back then just simply based on whatever I thought would be easy to rank for, right? So I didn't really have a solid plan for building out my sites. Basically my only plan was no plan, and that no plan was, rank this site and make that sweet affiliate money, right? And I think that's a lot of people. In fact, if you look actually at most of the sites that are listed for sale at the various brokerages and stuff like that, it becomes pretty obvious that this is what happens for most people out there. Someone just decides, hey, I'm interested in goldfish, so why don't I start a site around goldfish? Then that site happens to reach $1,000 a month, and then they try to sell it, and they may never even start another site again, right? Now, don't get me wrong, you can take that path. You can, say, hey, I have a goldfish, I want to make a goldfish site. I'm going to work on it for a while till I get tired of having a goldfish site. It might reach $1,000 a month, and then if you flip that, you get what, like just under $30,000 if you get a 35x valuation. And while that's not a ton of money, it's a pretty good amount of money for most people, right? And that's especially true if you've just, started a random site on a lark and you end up being like, hey, cool, I've got $30,000 now. That was a fun little hobby I had for a while, right? And yeah, that is a fun little hobby if that's what you want to do. But here's the thing. With proper planning, just like right from the start before you even buy that domain name, you can not only get yourself much better multiples when you go to sell that site, but you'll end up getting a much higher payout in the end because you won't be negotiating like most people end up doing when they sell a site. And why wouldn't you want to do that, right? Well, if you're here, then I'm assuming that's what you're all about, right? So let's dig in, shall we? So before you go out and you start a site because you really love model trains or because you have a pet goldfish or something like that, you have got to sit down and block out however long it takes to take, just like as much time as you need to properly research whatever market you're thinking about going into. You got to see what types of sites are people actually hungry for right now? What are people buying from these marketplaces? That's the number one thing you have to start with, because the worst case scenario here is you build out a site, it's successful, but nobody wants to buy it. And that's the absolute worst case scenario, and that can 100% happen. And a little better than that is maybe you do all of this work, you didn't do any research, and you can sell the site, but your valuation is crazy low. You don't want to do that either. And when I'm saying type of site here, what I'm specifically talking about here is the industry or the topic. What topics that, buyers are really hungry for right now. What are they looking for everywhere, every marketplace, Facebook groups, things like that. You can see below, I just made some notes real quick here at the bottom of this slide of things that I've been noticing lately in some of these groups that I'm in, where people are buying sites. without even using the brokerages. In the brokerages, I'm seeing a lot of pet sites move around, but pretty much everywhere else, people are buying gardening sites these days, and it doesn't even matter if it's not making any money, and they're paying like crazy multiples for these sites. And that's the kind of information that you need to know before you go into doing all of this work to make a site, because the end goal here is this is a business for you. You want to make as much money as you possibly can, right? So you need to know what is it that people are buying. And that is even before you start thinking about like what domain name am I going to use or anything like that. This right here is where everything gets started. So where do you get this data, right? Well, lucky for us, it's pretty easy to find this information that we need, because the brokers out there, they share just enough with us, about the sites that they list, that we can get a pretty good idea of what's hot and what's not in the market right now. But the key thing here to keep in mind is as we're doing this exercise, we're doing it on your own, is what you are seeing is what is hot right now. And depending on if you start your site on an age domain or a fresh domain that's never been used, it could take you several years before you are at the stage where you want to sell it. And will whatever you're looking at still be hot then? We'll get into more of that in a little later in this presentation, but that's something I want you to keep in the back of your mind as well. I also want to point out that with places like Motion Invest and Flippa, you can actually see the domain of the sites that are actually for sale. So you know exactly what the site is about, what kind of content they've done. And if you've seen a site like that sell for a decent amount, then you know exactly what to do, right? Now, the one thing I do want to point out here is that all of this research, you can't really speed through it for the most part, because it takes a lot of time. So you're going to be doing things like subscribing to the email list of all those brokers out there so that you get notified whenever there's a new listing. You'll be watching places like Flippa and these different Facebook groups. Just wherever people are buying and selling sites, you need to be keeping an eye on that, right? And then, as you see these new sites that are listed for sale at any of these locations online, you need to be regularly checking up on them to see, hey, did this sell yet? Or is it still kind of sitting out there and nobody wants it? Of course, as you're doing this and taking notes, which you should be doing for sure, you're never really going to be able to know exactly how much a site sold for, and what that valuation worked out to be for that final sale. But, in the grand scheme of things, that really doesn't matter, because our primary objective when working like this is to pinpoint what is selling quickly, what types of sites are showing up on these marketplaces in these Facebook groups. And as soon as they're listed, they are gone because everybody wants them. That's what you need to know. You need to know what people like to buy consistently. Now, let's say that you are in a hurry and you just, you really want to get your new site started just as soon as possible. Now, while I don't really recommend half-assing this process at all, I can understand the desire to act quickly here. So what I would do if I were you, assuming that I was in a hurry like this, is that I would focus on looking at those closed and pending sold listings on the Empire Flippers marketplace. That way you can identify the most recently listed sites that are either already sold or are going to be sold really soon. Now, each listing on their marketplace, if you've never used it, it has a number, and they helpfully put a little new listing tag that's on all of the brand new listings. So this means you can just go to their marketplace and kind of look in reverse numerical order to find the newer listings that have recently sold or that are pending sold. Do note, though, that you do have to have an account at Empire Flippers to view those listings, but it's free to sign up for, so that's okay. If you don't have an account there and you've never done this before, this kind of research on their site, I have put some step-by-step directions with screenshots, all in a PDF that you can download right now at skipblast.com/building empires. And that'll just kind of walk you through the process of doing this sort of research. Now, one thing that you'll want to keep in mind as you go through these listings on Empire Flippers and some of the other brokers is that often what they give you, the information they give you, it's kind of vague just in regards to what that site is actually about. So I remember maybe a couple of years ago, there was actually a listing on Empire Flippers for a site that I thought was just doing crazy numbers, and it was listed as religion and spirituality. Now, at first I was like, oh man, who knew that religious sites could make crazy money like this, right? And then I later learned that this site was actually focused on horoscopes and astrology and tarot card readings, things like that. So, it's important to as you go through these listings that you're looking at, to not make assumptions when you see these broad topics that the brokers have listed for the sites, because the last thing you want to do is see something like this, start yourself a site on Catholicism, when the real demand out there is for horoscopes, right? So once you know what you're going to make your site about based on this research that you've done, I recommend that you sit down and come up with a really solid plan for what you're going to do. I think once you actually start to think of site building and flipping as more of a business model instead of just a hobby or just something that you do for extra cash, I think basically when you really start treating it like a business, you're going to see better results from what you're trying to do. And if you've ever, started a business on your own, or maybe taken a business class in college or something like that, then you already know that every new business needs a really solid business plan if you're going to have a chance at succeeding. And that's basically what we're going to discuss now about doing, basically when you're making your plan of how you're going to build these sites, how you're going to get the most money for them when you flip them and things like that, and basically turn this into something that you can actually repeat. And yes, this does mean that we are technically still in a research phase here. We're not buying a domain yet. We're not starting a site, ordering content or anything like that. So for those of you who tend to get impatient, like me, I totally get that. I assure you that once you kind of get into the habit of doing this for every site that you create, it's not going to end up taking you quite as long as it's going to take you that very first time that you do it. And besides, once you know where you're going from the start when you create one of these sites, then you're less likely to fuck things up along the way, right? And so that's why it's so important that you get this right, just right from the start. So for me, what this process looks like is analyzing the current market, determining how I can compete with all of the other sites that are currently ranking, how I can grow my site in ways that are different from the competition, how I can monetize my site, and then I kind of put all of that together in sort of an operating plan that I can follow along as I am building out my site. I just do all of this in a spreadsheet, but you can do it however works best for you. You just need a place where you can organize your thoughts and refer back to it later. Sometimes I also end up making notes during this process in something like Dynalist or Evernote. So like I said, just do whatever works best for you. But whatever it is that you decide to use to create this business plan, it needs to be something that you can easily refer back to as you're working on your site over the next year, 2 years, whatever, just however long it is that you intend to work on your site and, get to the end result for your operating plan. You need to have that in something that you can always refer back to no matter where you are. It's easy to read. It's being, in this actionable format so that you can follow along no matter where you are in this process of creating your site. And, I know that most people, they don't really approach site building in such an analytical manner. And, most people probably don't really have much experience, if any at all, creating a business plan. So don't worry about that. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I create, each section of my business plan when I'm planning my own new sites. Once I've done my research in the market and I've found that topic that I've decided this is the one I'm going to build my site on, the very next thing that I want to do is I want to research that industry. Now, this is really important because sometimes this step right here, it actually results in me just completely abandoning what initially seemed like a really good idea to me. So the main thing that results in this sort of thing happening for me is when I start doing this research and I discover that I've found an industry that's actually on the decline. Now, ideally, you really want to be entering an industry that has either been stable for a while or that is on an upward trajectory, but not yet at that peak. I find actually that the quickest and easiest way to do this is just by popping the seed keyword for that topic I've identified just into Google Trends. And I can give you actually some perfect examples of this. I happened to learn about stand-up paddleboarding back in 2013, and it was really honestly just starting to gain momentum here in the United States at that time. So I did what any site builder would do. I started a site on it, right? I ended up actually flipping that site just about a year later. And then I had a non-compete of only a couple of years. So by that time that non-compete ended in 2016, I had a few more paddleboard sites already ready to go live. So I launched those. And then I actually ended up selling a total of 4 paddleboard sites during that period, with the last one selling in 2018. But I didn't actually end up making any more paddleboard sites after that because it just wasn't as popular as it used to be. And if I'd investigated entering the industry for the first time at really any point after July of 2017, then I would have tossed this idea aside, since it's obvious that the interest in paddleboarding had already peaked, right? Now you'll note in the screenshot that I took at Google Trends that we do have a peak the last 2 years in the summer, but that was really just from the pandemic and it's not really a normal peak. So I would still skip this one. And likewise, you're probably already too late to start a site that's focused around pickleball, at least if you want to be able to sell it for the most money possible. Now, that being said, it is possible that that pandemic spike that we can see in this screenshot is going to remain high and stabilized for a few years. So the only way I would make a site on this topic right now is if I could find an age domain that would work for it, because then I'd be able to flip it quicker. To give you an example of what I really like to see in Google Trends when I'm doing this analysis, you can look at the screenshot right here. It's for something that's called house astrology that I found when I was just looking for great things in Google Trends to show you guys. Before I discovered this in Google Trends, I wasn't really, I didn't really know what this topic was actually about. But I dug in a little deeper just so I would be able to tell you what it is. It seems to relate to horoscopes and what star sign your house is in, whatever that means. That may mean something to some of you. So if a site like this was listed for sale on Empire Flippers, though, keep in mind that they would probably categorize it as religion and spirituality. So just something to note in the back of your mind there. And just a quick disclaimer, please do not run out and start a site on this topic right here without first seeing if similar sites have sold, and then just kind of working through this whole process on your own. It could end up being a completely junk idea, and me mentioning it here in this presentation does not mean in any way that I'm validating it as a good idea that I've thoroughly researched, because I haven't. I took this screenshot and then just did a couple of minutes to see what it was actually, what it was actually about. Another example of what I really like to see in Google Trends is this chart here on the screen for golf. You can see that it does have some seasonality, but year over year, there's not much variation in terms of how popular it's been, at least in the last 5 years. So, seeing something that has this sort of stability, at least in terms of the last 5 years, that would be a sign for me, hey, you should move forward with this site on this topic. Do a little more research, see if it's something that would actually work, because, the search volume is there and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. And again, quick disclaimer, I'm not by any means suggesting that you go out and start yourself a site on golf. Just work through the process. If you think you might be interested in it, see if it might actually be a good idea for you to actually start if you think you might want to. So if I've identified a topic that passes my Google Trends test, then the next thing that I do is dig in a little deeper on my analysis for that particular topic. When I'm doing my deeper analysis, what I want to know is, who are the top players right now? What sites are ranking? What do they have going on with their sites? Are there any new sites that seem to be doing really well right now? And taking that kind of broad snapshot of what's going on, it really helps me complete the rest of the parts of my business plan that I'm creating. Now, you can use your favorite SEO tool for this, and whatever domain authority rating score that tool uses, kind of like DR for Ahrefs. So when I'm doing this deep analysis, what I like to do is I start out by kind of just like searching for the really big keywords and then the really low competition keywords, so that I can find as many sites as possible that are ranking in this particular, industry. So let's say I went ahead and I did want to start a golf site. Then I would look to see what sites are on page 1 for keywords like maybe best golf clubs, best golf bags, things like that. And then I would also look at informational keywords that are going to be a little easier to rank for, which would mean our weaker sites. That would be things like our Callaway golf club's good, maybe a specific model of Callaway golf club, make it a little more niche down. Things like our Costco golf ball's good. That's the kind of things that I would use to kind of uncover as many sites as possible, right? When you input keywords like this into your favorite SEO tool, or even just an incognito window in Chrome, you really need to be compiling a list of these domains that you're coming across in your spreadsheet, right? What I like to do is include things like the estimated traffic that's showing up, what the DR is, or whatever the authority scores that you're using. Sometimes I also keep track of how many backlinks they have. Basically, anything like that your SEO tool spits out that would be relevant to you growing your site, go ahead and put it in your spreadsheet. And then once you have this core list of all of these domains that you found, you can then expand your search by looking at those domains that are listed as competing domains in that SEO tool that you're using, or similar domains, however it's listed on your tool. And so what you end up with is just this massive list of sites, right? And after you are done building that list, you either sort it by traffic or domain authority score or something like that. And then you're really looking for the outliers there. So this is going to be things like low authority and high traffic, things like that. What I like to do is I like to kind of highlight some weak sites, some mid-level sites, and some really basically authority sites, so that I can really focus on digging in deeper on those. But I still am working with this master list as well. And this is something I'm going to refer back to basically throughout the lifetime of me building my site. And as new sites actually appear in the landscape there, I will be adding them to my site and to my spreadsheet as well. With that smaller selection of sites that you had pulled out as outliers from that master competitors list that you created, what you need to do next is go through each one of those sites that you've marked to kind of make a list basically of everything that they're doing. So what type of content are they creating? What types of links are they building for their site if they're doing any link building at all? How are they monetizing the site? Does it look like maybe they've got some active social profiles that seem to be getting engagement? Do they maybe have other methods of traffic, things like that? Basically, just make a list of everything that you can note about each of those sites. Once you've got all of that down, it's time to move on to determining how you can compete with these sites specifically. Like I said, we're only looking at these core outliers that you have selected, but eventually you're going to want to also look at some of those other sites on your list as well, especially the ones that are doing really well. And as you go through this part of the exercise, you may even end up discovering that you just actually can't compete with any of these sites, maybe because they're all industry experts like golf pros, or maybe they're doing some crazy link building. Maybe they have connections with journalists that you'll never be able to actually get. So, you'll never be able to actually compete on a link building level. And those are the kind of things that you need to really be looking for to discover at this point, because you don't want to put in all of this work on your site and then it not actually be able to meet the goals that you set. And so by really digging into these sites and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it, that lets you know if you can compete. And, only you know your strengths, because maybe you do have some great connection with journalists and you can compete on links. So that's really going to vary for everyone. So like I just mentioned, when I'm deciding not only if, but how I can compete with these other sites that I'm going to be going up against, the first thing that I want to look at is the backlink profile. I do this because both I really, really hate doing link building, but also because it can be really expensive. Like you can be spending a ton of money on links if you're going up against people who are doing like crazy amounts of link building each month. At least for me, I never want to have to compete just on backlinks alone. And what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the backlink profiles of these sites is, what types of links are they actually building? Are they things that I think maybe I can actually replicate? Or does it look like they're just spending, a ton of money each month buying links? And again, like I said, I also want to note if it looks like they have connections with journalists, which is something that's really happening right now in the dogs industry. People who have dog sites probably haven't even noticed that it's coming. But there's a guy right now building up all kinds of dog sites, and he seems to have crazy connections. So like that is a site I would definitely not start right now. And ideally when I'm going through this part of the exercise, I've happened to find a pocket of the internet, where people aren't really doing much active link building. But I think you'll discover that over time, that's actually becoming harder and harder to find these days. So now I also want to really take a close look at the type of content that these sites are putting out. I want to know, are they doing like a lot of long form content, or are they doing more shorter content stuff? Are they using a lot of stock photos and videos? Does it seem like they're creating their own videos, like really unique stuff, maybe taking their own pictures? And how's the quality of that content? Does it look like they have some industry experts writing things? Does it look like it was done by AI? Things like that. I also want to note when I'm looking at the content, does it look like I'm going to be competing against someone who's actually really good at SEO? Or can I just beat them with just better on-page SEO? And that's the kind of things you really want to be thinking about when you're assessing the content of all these sites you're going to be competing against. Now, I also want to pay attention to if they're doing any type of internal linking on their site. And I want to know if they're doing topic clusters or not. Maybe they have just content all over the place, because that would actually be great for me to compete against, right? And next, the next thing you'll actually want to determine is, does it look like they're just relying on organic traffic alone? Does it look like they have a pretty active email list? Like, go ahead and sign up for their email list. See how often they're sending out emails, things like that. Look at that backlink profile. See if they're dropping links in forums. Maybe they're actually using that as a traffic source. Do they have social media profiles where it looks like, they're getting a lot of engagement, a lot of comments, things like that? And don't forget YouTube here, because that can actually send a lot of traffic to your site as well. Take notes. Just take notes on all of this. Take notes on how each site is earning money. Do they seem to only have one revenue stream? Do they have several? Are they affiliate focused? Are they ad focused? Is it a combination? Are they selling like info products? Do they have a course they're selling? Maybe some printables? Maybe they have a membership program, things like that. See how everyone else is making money, so that not only you'll know what they're doing, but it'll give you ideas on how you can actually make money as well. And of course, just knowing like, oh, hey, this is how this guy makes money. It doesn't really help you when it comes to competing with the site in terms of ranking. But like I said, we need this data anyway for the next step in our process. So write this down as well. Okay, so by this point, you've already validated a topic for your site, that's going to be attractive to buyers, and you've already done your competitor research, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to use that research that you've done to determine the best way to move forward with growing this new site that we're creating. And we're going to put all of these ideas that we come up with in our spreadsheet. Now, I'm just going to run through just some growth strategies for you here. But when you're doing this exercise for your own site that you're starting, you should be putting every single one of these ideas in that spreadsheet as you brainstorm. Now, the key here, is not to just copy what you see other successful sites doing, right? Because in the end, what you want is for buyers to be hungry for your site specifically, not just any site on the topic. So that means we're going to have to kind of level things up a bit. Let's say that the research that you've done, it shows that your competition, they're using just all stock photos, right? So now you can level this up by getting unique photos. And you can often actually source these for free. It's not as difficult as you might think. I find that Instagram is actually a really great way to do this. What you need to do is you just, start an account for your site, and then you just do reels whenever you need a new image. Maybe you're asking all fellow people who play golf, maybe everyone who uses a Callaway club. I'm writing an article about how great Callaway clubs are. Can you send me some photos of your clubs? And usually all you have to do is say, I'll give you a shout out in the article, or I'll give you a shout out in my next reel. And these people, that's what they're happy with. You don't have to pay them at all. It's pretty insane, actually. And you can actually end up doing the same thing if you need unique videos for your site. And if you don't like using Instagram for this purpose, or maybe even if Instagram isn't really good for your audience, you can do the same thing in Facebook groups and any kind of forums that are relevant. Right now, you're probably thinking, like, why is she telling me to get unique images when we're talking about growing our site? Well, there actually is a really important reason I'm telling you this. The secret here is that having these unique images and even these unique videos, it really unlocks the power of Google Images for your site. And you can actually get considerable search traffic just from Google Images. I have sites of my own right now that rank #1 in Google Images for these keywords that they would never be able to rank for in just regular content. And by ranking #1, I'm getting like thousands upon thousands of people coming to my site each month just based on that Google image ranking. And so that's why it's so important that you don't neglect how important your images are. There's also another weird thing that I've noticed in recent years. You can actually have a site that gets hit by a Google algorithm update. So like where you maybe lose all of the rankings for your site, but those Google Images rankings, you don't lose those. It's like they're not affected at all, at least in my experience. Now, I don't know if this is like by design with Google or if it's just a loophole they forgot to close, but it's been like this for years. And so that's another reason it's important to not sleep on the images. While it's impossible to know like exactly how each of your competitors are getting traffic to their site, just seeing if they have active social profiles that seem to get engagement, just like comments and things like that, that is a great way to see what's working for them and even just what they're trying. If you see that they're trying social and they're not getting any engagement, then you know not to waste your time on it more than likely. The last thing that you want to do when you're trying to maximize site valuation is have a site that only gets traffic from one source. Now, for most people, that's going to be Google Organic. And while you can sell sites that only get traffic from Google Organic, you will get a much higher multiple and a much quicker sale if you have diversity here. In fact, I recommend that you test all of the social channels that you can to determine which of them, if any, that they can actually be a good source of traffic for you. And don't just give this a try for 2 weeks and then throw in the towel. In my experience, for some of these social platforms, it can take weeks or months before you get any traction there. So what I like to do is give myself 6 months of trying, to get meaningful traffic from one of these social sites before I give up. Also consider that for some sites, you may even be able to do well running things like paid Facebook ads. You could run this to a group that you've created or maybe a page for your site. And then you just use that to post articles from your site. And then you can basically use that to get traffic back to your site. And if you have an audience that actually hangs out on Facebook, this can be a great strategy. And don't forget that email lists are also a great way to build traffic that are not reliant at all on Google. And an engaged email list is very valuable when you're ready to sell your site. You can also get really good traffic from relevant forums as well as Reddit. I'm a huge fan of using the Today I Learned subreddit for traffic. And that is if you're creating content that will be actually a good fit for the audience in that subreddit. Now, just to be warned, if you've never used Reddit before, that the audience there, they can be kind of a finicky bunch. And they can spot a spammer coming a mile away. So don't waste your time trying to post links to commercial content, on Reddit. I find that it's actually best for your non-commercial content. YouTube can also be a good traffic source, but it does take some time to get traction there. And for many people, creating videos can be a real time suck. Plus, it won't work for every audience. So you can do some research to see if anyone else is having success with it, and maybe even some experimenting of your own to determine if it's actually worth your time. However, it is ideal if you can afford to pay someone else to create those videos, because this creating videos thing is not a skill that all potential buyers are actually going to have. But if you can tell them that you have a freelancer who is willing to continue creating videos for them, then you've solved that problem for the buyer. In addition to growing different traffic streams for your site, don't forget that you need to be creating great content for your site. Often great content can bring in new site visitors because it gets shared more often online, than your typical 2 cents a word content. And it's really good if you can think outside the box here and start creating content that stands out from the rest of the sites that you're competing against. Maybe do some original research by joining forums, Facebook groups, and subreddits so that you can conduct surveys. This is the type of content that gets shared on its own and often nets you awesome natural backlinks. Combine that with some digital PR and you're really onto something. Another thing that I like to do is to use Haro to create articles around quotes from real experts in the industry. Not just quotes from people like you and me who answer those emails. Often these people end up actually sharing the article you create in LinkedIn and their other social channels. And then that gives you even more new traffic. I do the same thing when I'm writing articles where I can mention a small business or maybe some small YouTube channels that have a pretty good following of their own. And then I just tag them on social or reach out to them to let them know that I created this article and that I profiled them in it. And then often they end up sharing the article with their audience, which gives me another boost in traffic. Do stuff like this enough and you end up with a constant flow of traffic that's not from organic search. In addition to working on growing the site with multiple traffic streams, you really got to work on your monetization plan as well. Now, I think when most people start a site, they have maybe 2 different plans for monetizing the site. I'm sure you already know what those are going to be. The Amazon affiliate program and display ads, which tends to be just AdSense for most people. And you know what? Hey, I've sold plenty of sites in the last decade that have been monetized by only the Amazon affiliate program. And you know what? That works. It really does. But the sites where I've gotten the best valuation and the ones that I've sold for basically full asking price with no negotiating, those have been the sites where I've had multiple revenue streams. The main takeaway here for basically plotting out how you're going to monetize your site is diversity. Buyers love diversity because it means less risk for them in the end. But go ahead, put Amazon affiliate program and AdSense at the top of that list because let's face it, when you start a new site, you don't really have many options because those standalone programs are not going to let you in just yet. So basically you start with those until something better comes along. I think most people already know how to earn more from display ads by basically leveling up as your traffic grows. But just in case you don't, here's a quick rundown. AdSense tends to universally pay you the least amount. Once you can, it's a really good idea to move up to Ezoic because they tend to pay better than AdSense in my experience. Then for most people, the next move is Mediavine once you hit 50,000 sessions, followed by AdThrive at 100,000 page views. Now, I'm not really going to get into which premium ad partner is best for site owners and which one that I prefer to use. If you really, really want my opinion, you can email me for it. But I will say this as it pertains to flipping sites. You should know that AdThrive does not make the buyer re-qualify to keep the site on AdThrive. This means that if you're buying a site that someone got into AdThrive at a lower traffic amount, so lower than that 100,000 page views, then you will not be penalized by not already having an AdThrive account. But on the flip side, if you're selling a site on Mediavine that was an add-on site under that 50,000 sessions, then that buyer is not really going to be able to keep it on Mediavine unless they already have their own account and they actually get clearance to do so. So that's just something to keep in mind. For affiliate programs, the Amazon program it's actually a great place to start, but once you can, and basically as soon as you can, it's a good idea to look for other programs so that you can promote those alongside your Amazon link. I always recommend that you keep the Amazon links there when you get into other programs because there are going to be people who are always going to prefer to buy on Amazon and you don't want to lose that money, right? Now, often these other affiliate programs that you can get into, they not only offer you a higher commission rate than you're going to get with Amazon, but they tend to have a lot longer cookies as well. And then when you start sending them good traffic, it's common for them to give you like a bonus payout or even boost your commission rates for a while. However, there is one thing to note here. If you get a special rate or agreement with a private affiliate program, then you may end up having to include that account with the site when you sell it. Now, this tends to only happen if the program will not give the buyer the same rate as you. I always try to avoid giving up my affiliate account whenever possible. And this sort of thing, it doesn't really happen for like your share a sale account or things like that, but don't be surprised if you get asked for it. So most of the time when people are plotting out the revenue streams for their site, this is basically where they stop when they're working on diversification, right? They open their share sale account or their commission junction account. They start earning from a new program or two, and they think, hey, I'm super diversified. Wrong. That tiny effort at diversity is not enough to get the maximum amount from selling your site. For this brainstorming exercise of your business plan, you need to come up with all of the ways that you can earn money from your site, even if you basically never plan on implementing those ideas. This is often, like for me, doing e-commerce stuff is something that I will not do for most of my sites. So that's just an example for you. Now, part of the reason that I like to make this like super exhaustive list is so that when I get ready to sell the site, then I can say to the buyer, hey, I've got a list of 5 new revenue streams that I've not really had time to implement yet, and I'll give them to you if you buy this site. You'll be surprised how often that works to get people to buy your sites. Now, as we go through a few more ideas here, I do want to point out that you need to always keep in mind, that these potential buyers who are looking at your site, they may not have the skills needed to pull some of these off. And that means if you have a freelancer or a service that you use and can then include with the sale, that makes your site more valuable to buyers. I find that info products are one of the easiest revenue streams that you can actually add to a site. This is going to include things like printables, maybe like downloading a budgeting spreadsheet, things like that, even courses, honestly. And the really good thing about these info products that you can add to your site is this is often like a one-time thing. You create it once, then it's just passive income, and buyers really, really love to see that. Now, depending on what your site is about, you could create things like budgeting spreadsheets, Photoshop presets, ebooks, courses. I once actually had a site that sold a car bill of sale template as a PDF, which is honestly ridiculous when you think about it, because how many free templates for that are there to download, right? So basically, don't discount an idea like this just because you think, oh, people can get it for free, because you'll be surprised what they'll pay for. Membership programs are something else that work well for some sites, and they require minimal upkeep for buyers. These are relatively easy to set up, and they offer the bonus of recurring income. Bolting on an e-commerce store to your site can be another good option for you, though I do caution you that something like a print-on-demand store is going to be a more attractive option for buyers than something like that requires holding on to inventory and things like that. And then, of course, drop shipping is going to be a better option than to having to keep the inventory as well. If it works for your audience, then you can also do things like consulting. But again, this is something that can be a challenge to sell a buyer on unless you find someone who has the same skills and could keep it up if they wanted to. One site where I've actually seen this done in a smart way was a horoscope and tarot card site, where tarot card readings were actually offered for sale as a revenue stream. The owner of the site did not do the readings, but had partnered with someone else, and then they did like a revenue split sort of arrangement. Something like that would be perfect for buyers because it means they could keep the revenue stream without any work on their end. If you have trouble coming up with revenue stream ideas, I've got a course on the topic that you can check out. You can also look at the list of your competitors that you made where you noted how they were monetizing their sites. You may find something there that you would have missed if you were just kind of brainstorming by yourself. Once you finish this step in your business plan, it's time to look at all of that data that you've gathered and the notes that you've made, because now we're going to come up with an operating plan. Coming up with your operating plan is a great way to keep yourself focused on growing the site so that you can actually reach whatever goals it is that you've set for yourself for your site. What this plan is going to look like, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with your site. For instance, if you want to just cash out with maybe $50,000 in hand, that's going to look a lot different than if you, say, wanted a sale in the mid-six-figure range. And that's mostly because it takes a lot less time and resources to reach $50,000 than a few $100,000. My typical site plan is based on roughly a loose 2-year time period if I'm starting with an age domain, or a 3 to 5 year plan for a fresh domain. Now that's assuming that I'm looking to cash out once a site hits somewhere in the $2,000 to $4,000 a month income range. It's basically just a hit list of all the things that I need to do, listed in a logical order so that I can get my site to at least $2,000 a month. I'm always starting sites in my operating plan with a content sprint, and that of course includes keyword research and topic cluster planning. Now, depending on if I'm using a fresh or an age domain, link building will be early in my operating plan hit list. The rest of the things on that list, they tend to vary by site as they will for you. But basically, you just list all of the things that you need to do for the site and just in some logical order, and then you just go through that list one by one. This ends up being the actionable list that you need to follow in order for your site to both reach the goals that you've set for it and to get that bigger valuation than if you had just half-assed your way over the finish line. In addition to creating this business plan for your site and creating that operating plan hit list to follow along with, there are a few other things that you can do to make sure you keep that site valuation high when you go to list it with the brokers. Keep in mind that things like content costs, if you're outsourcing your content, those should not be included as an expense for valuations because they're actually seen as an investment to your site. So you don't have to worry about how much you're spending on content. Most of the brokers, like Empire Flippers, they actually work like this and they will not make you include content outsourcing as an expense. But there will be some things that you do for your site that are going to be actual expenses. For those instances, what I like to do is front load my expenses well in advance of a sale so that I don't actually have to have them included as an expense and thus lowering my valuation. Owning the trademark for your site also helps to make your site more valuable. So if you've got a solid brand that you're building, then go ahead and get that trademark. It's also worth noting that sometimes you can do everything that we've talked about today and still have buyers who insist on negotiating and want to give you less than the asking price for your site. So then what? Well, I found that being prepared for this in advance often prevents it from happening at all. And the best way that I've discovered to do this is to just include 6 months of scheduled content with the site. So a few months before I know that I'm going to list a site for sale, I just go ahead and I kind of slow down my posting schedule to only 1 or 2 times a week. This means if I want to include 6 months of content that's already scheduled to publish weekly on the site, I need either 24 or 48 articles, right? Assuming that you're paying around 4 cents a word, then that's just $40 per article for a 1,000 word article. And yes, 1,000 word articles is all that I give them at this point. That means that including this extra content costs you either $960 or $1,920, depending on if you're doing 1 article per week or 2 for them. And here's the thing. You can make these included articles contingent upon a sale at full price only. I've never had a buyer call my bluff on this, and when I've not done this and had someone want to negotiate the price, it's always more than $2,000 that they want off the sales price. This pre-scheduled content makes your site more valuable and more attractive to buyers because it means that they can buy your site and essentially not have to do any work on it for 6 months if they don't want to. So I think that essentially covers pretty much everything that I know so far about getting the most for your site when you're selling it. I do hope that this gives you something to think about before you start your next site. And if you've already started a site without making a plan like this, don't worry. It's not too late for you. You can still make your business plan and get more organized on what you need to do right now to get that site wherever it is that you want to take it. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have on this topic. You can reach me by email at shauna@skipblast.com. Just know that I do get a fair amount of emails each week, so it may take me a few days to get back to you. And if you're interested in more training on this topic, I do have a special discount code on my website flipping course bundle that is exclusively offered to those of you who have attended this presentation. You can get the full details on that at skipblast.com/buildingempires. I've also got some other extra resources for you that you can also find on that same page, skipblast.com/buildingempires. Thank you so much for the time that you spent watching my presentation. I truly, truly appreciate it. And best of luck to all of you on your next site flip.